The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on an initiative called Engineering with Nature. It all started in 2010. And this is the EWN Podcast. EWN is developing and implementing nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It's bringing together a growing international community of scientists, engineers, and researchers from all kinds of disciplines that are committed to harnessing the power of nature to solve problems. The EWN Podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
So this episode starts with a story. In 1604, 79 members of an expedition from France, including Samuel de Champlain, came to St Croix Island off the shores of Maine and New Brunswick to set up a colony in the new land. They called it l'Acadie, Acadia. Over the severe winter of 1604 to 1605, 35 of the settlers died, likely of scurvy. In the spring, members of the Passamaquoddy Tribe befriended the French survivors and brought them food, and ultimately their health improved. So in the summer of 1605, the survivors decided to move the Acadia settlement to Port Royal, Nova Scotia. And the rest is history. The Acadians went on to play an integral part of the histories of Canada, the United States, and France. Today, that 6.5-acre uninhabited island and its very significant history is threatened by high tides, shoreline erosion, powerful winter storms, and more, all exacerbated by climate change. Our guests have come together to figure out how to protect and preserve St Croix Island and its unique historical significance using nature-based solutions. Welcome to Season 6, Episode 6. I'm here with Jeff King, National Lead of the Engineering with Nature program, who also happens to be the project lead on this initiative for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Jeff, I know you're absolutely passionate about St. Croix Island and about this project.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. In fact, in my opinion, St. Croix Island is located in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. I've always had a fascination with the state of Maine, its rich history, the wonderful people, and fantastic landscapes. And of course, that list about this region could go on and on. This project offers an opportunity to work with the Passamaquoddy Nation and the National Park Service to learn more about the history of this area. In fact, we have an opportunity at St. Croix Island to look at opportunities for incorporating nature-based solutions to be able to preserve that rich heritage and also look for ways to reduce risk for the island and issues concerning erosion. And what we've done with this particular project is it is now part of our cold regions work unit. And as you might recall, we had a chance to talk a little bit about cold regions in Season 2, Episode 3 with Sam Whiten of EA Engineering, Science and Technology, as well as Enda Murphy with the National Research Council of Canada. And so this is another project internal to that work unit, and we're just absolutely excited to be able to talk about it here today.
Jeff, it's such an interesting project and truly a collaborative effort. I'm really pleased to introduce our first guest, Donald Suoma, who's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Passamaquoddy Nation. Donald, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Dungok. My name's Donald Suoma. I'm a citizen of the Passamaquoddy Tribe. Spent majority of my life in the region here, except for a few years globe-trotting. And the St. Croix has always been a special place, not just for the one winter that the Acadians spent on it, but for the last 15,000 years of Passamaquoddy history. The island holds a lot of history, and its location is really important because it's a transition zone going from let's say you're going from fresh water down the St Croy River into the ocean, that's the stopping place. Or if you're going from the ocean into the fresh water, the St Croy is right in this beautiful area. I agree with Jeff. This is the most beautiful area. That's why my ancestors settled here. And
Wonderful. Thank you, Donald. We look forward to hearing more from you about the history of the island and your very, very deep roots on the island. Our next guest is Becky Cows. She's from the National Park Service. Becky's the Chief of Resource Management for Acadia and St Croix Island National Parks. Becky, welcome. Please tell us a bit about yourself and about your role.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here this morning with everyone. Yes, my title is the Chief of Resource Management for St Croix and Acadia, and I've been in the Park Service since 2006. Had the privilege of knowing Donald for many years and working together on history and Indigenous archaeology and culture. St Croix is really important to me personally as a touch point for relationships, but also because it's part of the mission of the Park Service to protect these special places in perpetuity. And St Croix represents one of the interesting little out of the way, if you will, but important history places related to climate change and how we think about managing under rapid environmental change across the Park Service.
Thanks, Becky. We really look forward to learning more about your work and especially the work that you're doing on the island. Our third guest is Amy Hunt. Amy's Senior Project Manager at EA Engineering, Science and Technology, Inc. in New Hampshire. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, Sarah. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all about this really unique project. This is a very special island on the border of U.S. and Canada. Even the location, I think, is pretty unique. I'm the project manager for EA for the St. Croix Island project. And I became really interested in working on coastal resiliency projects when I had the opportunity to work with my colleague, Sam Whiten, who Jeff mentioned you did a podcast with on the cold regions in season 2. And he and I have been working together on natural resource projects for about the last 11 years and more recently on coastal resilience projects.
Great. Well, welcome. Let's start by talking about the history of St. Croix Island and why it's so important to preserve the island. Donald, I'd like you to put that historical perspective in context for us.
well, when I look at St. Croix, I look at as a symbol of the change that's going on in related to climate, because right before your eyes you can see the rising ocean, the erosion, the shrinking of the island. And it makes you think all the time. Every time I look at that island, I think about climate change and the importance of trying to make other people aware of it. The history of the island goes back thousands of years. It's been an important site, stopping site for canoe voyages. In our language, in the Passamaquoddy language, we call it Matunwes. It means the place where we store food, the place that's out of food, where there's no food. You know, the name sort of changed over time. It was a storage place because thousands of years ago, wolves were all over the place. 10,000 years ago, there was the short-nosed bear, you know, that stood like 12 feet tall, and he was looking for an easy meal. So it's important for the tribe to store food in a safe location. In times of plenty, you smoke the fish and you salt it and you store it underground. So it's always a place you can go back to for food. But the meaning sort of evolved after the Acadians had their problems there, and it became the little out-of-food place, because that's where pretty much besides scurvy, they pretty well starved to death. So going back on the importance of the island, I just don't look at the 1604 as an important time overall, because we focus on that 1604, that one winter, as if that's the whole history of the island. Where the tribe's been on the island for so long, and the importance of the island, it's hard to explain the importance on it. I've camped on the island because I wanted to feel the same things that my ancestors felt when they camped on the island, and it's a pretty tough place. It looks like this nice little island, but in the morning times, you have the fog coming across the island, and if you're in a tent, it goes right to your bone. So you have to be prepared for that. It's a tough place, and then when there's a little bit of storm, you know that that's probably not a good place to be.
That's true.
So it served its purpose as a transition zone, going from one world, the saltwater world, to the freshwater world, and a safe place.
And 1604 was just literally a point in time in its very, very long history.
Yeah, in tribal history, we got to look at the whole thing. 1604 did represent a change in our relationship with the outside world. That was one of the first times, besides the contact in the 1500s with the Basque whalers, but 1604, that was the first time the French tried to make a settlement. And for us, that was the first time anybody tried to come into our territory, sort of uninvited. But we're a peaceful people, and we tried to start a good relationship. And that good relationship, I think, sort of forged the French relationship with all the Wabanaki across the region, because word spread that we had a good encounter with them. Then they went to Port Royal and had a good encounter with the Mi'kmaq. So I think it sort of set the tone across North America with the French and the Wabanaki and the other Algonquin people.
Interesting perspective. Thank you, Donald. Becky, maybe you could talk a little bit about the challenges that are facing the island. I mean, Donald talked about it really being at the point of climate change. Because of its location, it's always been threatened by erosion and sea level rise, but how's it being affected now?
You're absolutely right, and Donald really gave a wonderful picture of some of the challenges, and it's a fairly extreme environment there. It's a 6.5 acre island in the middle of the river. The tidal amplitude range at St Croix Island is in the neighborhood of 24 feet, and so erosion has always been a problem. The Park Service recognized that at the very beginning of the management of the unit when it became a monument in 1948. And since that time, there's been various considerations of how to manage the island, how to protect it from erosion. That southern bluff is very impacted by weather and climate change over time. We measured, just for example, between 2015 and 2016, that bluff lost about 233 cubic meters of sediment just as a result of a couple of very severe storms that hit the island. So over time, Park Service has done a lot of consideration around how should the island be managed. Should we try to build some kind of structures to prevent erosion? Should we simply throw up our hands and say, well, it's going to erode away, so we do something called perhaps managed retreat? But the opportunity to work with Jeff just in the last year and a half, and with Amy around, thinking about what is a nature-based solution for protecting the island and giving us a range of alternatives to management is really important to the understanding of how the Park Service thinks about the long-term management and preservation of the island in partnership with Donald and the Passamaquoddy Tribe and Parks Canada and other agencies.
Absolutely. So let's talk about how you came together to collaborate on developing this project to protect and preserve the island. And Jeff, maybe you could kick us off. Tell us how the initiative came together.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. And as Amy has said, and I shared that this was part of the Cold Regions Work Unit within the Engineering with Nature program. And we were really looking for additional projects that we could include that would help us to better understand these types of systems and what interventions could be developed in cold regions. And so as part of a conversation with Sam Whiten and thinking through what could be possibilities, Sam indicated that there were some really interesting conversations happening with the National Park Service about St. Croy. And of course, if anybody knows me, they know that I am a huge fan of the National Park Service. I just love their mission. I think they do wonderful things. And so I really saw this as a wonderful chance to work directly with the National Park Service. And as part of that, reached out to Becky and had a chance to go visit Becky. I believe that was last summer. And she hosted me at St. Croy, and we went out to the island and had a chance to walk around. And we'll include some pictures on the website for the audience to be able to take a look at. But it's really fascinating to see what has been happening out there in this bluff that Becky referenced and how much erosion has occurred. And so when you think about a site like this, you can't really go in with the idea that conventional infrastructure is the right way to do it. I mean, there's so many things that we want to be considerate of, and certainly there's the traditional ecological knowledge that Donald and the Passamaquoddy Tribe bring to this conversation that is so critical that we integrate into the conversation and the ideas that we put forward. And also just the aesthetic of the island. We have to be thinking nature-based solutions because of the rich heritage that is there and wanting to make sure that that is preserved for generations to come. And so those are, in my mind, what made this so interesting, and the idea of being able to work directly with Donald and the Passamaquoddy Tribe as well as the National Park Service, and then bringing in all of these other partners with their expertise and skill sets to really dive into this and identify what we think will be some interesting ideas, just made this such a wonderful project for us to include.
Absolutely. And Amy, I understand that right from the get-go, taking a multidisciplinary approach has been critical to the development of the project. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. We were able to bring together a multidisciplinary international coalition of partners for this project. We know there's been a lot of data collection and monitoring of the island by several parties, mostly, as Becky was saying, the National Park Service. So we wanted to collect and utilize all of the existing data that was out there and gain insight from all the folks who had been observing the erosion at St. Croy and monitoring and documenting it. And so we wanted to leverage their expertise and resources as we work together to conduct research that lets us look at potential options for use of natural and nature-based features to stabilize and mitigate the ongoing erosion at the site. But this has been a really interesting experience for me to be coordinating so closely with our project partners, some of whom are also our technical partners. So we're depending on modeling from the folks at ERDIC, Coastal and Hydraulics Laboratory, as well as some data from the Cold Regions Research and Engineering Laboratory. And we're also working with National Park Service using their elevation data that they have collected. Some of their engineers and geologists have been doing that for over the past probably, maybe 15 years, Becky?
Yes.
About that long.
Yes.
So it's been a pretty great experience with working with the project partners as partners and clients, but also technical partners.
What a fantastic way to describe everything that's happening. And in my opinion, this is one of those rare opportunities where we have brought together so many different engineers, hydrodynamic modelers, civil engineers, coastal engineers, landscape architects, other scientists, all very interested and engaged in looking at the island. I mentioned the aesthetic earlier, but also the physical processes in and around the island. And then using all of this information and all these skill sets to really help us come up with designs for nature-based solutions that we can look to explore, better understand how they might sit in the landscape, and then prioritize what I hope will be a very effective nature-based solution to present to the National Park Service.
And you've got many, many project partners, Jeff, I understand, starting with the Passamaquoddy Nation. The island is on their territory. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and Donald being here today is such a pleasure and wonderful to have him offer his perspective and insight that will certainly help us and inform this project. And it's Donald, it's the Passamaquoddy Nation, and it's others that are also playing critical roles in helping us to design this project and identify the best approach for how we would integrate a nature-based solution. And I would ask Donald to speak to the many contributions of the Passamaquoddy Nation and what they are contributing.
The work being done here on the St Croy, I'm looking long-term. If this is successful, we can start applying it to the many islands in the Passamaquoddy Bay and maybe all along the coast of Maine. Even with the National Park Service, they're in charge of a lot of the coastal islands that they might be able to replicate this. If it's a success, this will sprout out from there. So we're going to provide our knowledge of the workings of the ocean and the fresh water, our knowledge of the landscape around, provide history, and try to understand, for me, try to understand some of the science that's going to be involved in this. And I'd like to see it culturally based and not to disrupt the ecosystem around it, because there's other factors, the visual factor, the factor of people coming on and going or needing to go to the island. It's such an important piece of work that's going to be done.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Donald. And I agree that the Passamaquoddy Nation will be there offering critical insight in terms of how we proceed and what ultimately we elect to pursue as part of this project. And Donald, you brought up another wonderful point, and that is that the knowledge and information that we learn here at the St. Croix Island can be transferable to other areas. And that, I think, is important for our listeners to understand, is that this is happening in a lot of areas across the Northeast and certainly in the state of Maine and in Canada, New Brunswick. And so learning more about what we can do in the way of interventions and ways that we can mitigate some of the erosion that's occurring here, it's important. And I see long-term opportunities for how we leverage the knowledge we gain. So thank you for that. And then what I would also say is that, we have other partners too that are working hard to help us advance this project. And certainly the National Park Service is right there with us, and we'll ask Becky to speak to that in just a minute. But I also wanted to mention it's also the National Research Council of Canada. It's Parks Canada. It's the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. We've heard from Amy and EA Engineering, Science and Technology, what they're doing in contributions for this project. But it's also the University of Virginia and the Dredge Research Collaborative. They too are offering their services through use of landscape architecture to help us envision and realize the potential for these projects. And maybe also just building on this, the Army's Engineer Research and Development Center, of course, everybody knows I'm affiliated with ERDIC, but it's also 3 different laboratories internal to ERDIC that are also contributing their skills and expertise. So it's the Cold Regions Research Engineering Laboratory, it's the Coastal and Hydraulics Laboratory, and also the Environmental Laboratory, all under ERDIC, working to support this effort.
That's a lot of partners and a lot of brain power coming together to work on this little island that's so important. You've got all sorts of experience and expertise coming to the table. Becky, maybe you can talk a little bit about your role and the role of the National Park Service in this project.
Sure. So, the National Park Service has 425 units, and they range from everything from little St Croix Island to vast, areas like the Gates of the Arctic, which is the largest park unit. And all of them are experiencing climate change impacts. So the importance of this work for me personally, but for St. Croix and for the Park Service is to bring to bear really good thinking around how we do our job. Our mission is to protect and preserve these special places in perpetuity, engage with tribal partners because every one of our units is on Indigenous land, and also to afford the opportunities for the visitors to the Park Service to be able to enjoy them. So we need this information. We need to be able to really think about the climate change piece of management going forward. So we need the best available science to make good management decisions, and we need to have that culturally based appropriate learning as well. So the importance of this project is one of a class of those that are leading the way for the Park Service to think about managing under rapid environmental change.
So critical, and so critical that this project can be a model for so many of the other projects that you're working on. I'd like to pick up and talk about the role that you have, Amy. You're the lead for the engineering firm. Can you talk about the engineering contribution to this project, what you're working on?
So we first became involved in this project through a contract we currently have with the National Park Service. We were doing a third-party review of a geotechnical report provided to the Park Service for the island, and most of the recommendations in that report included hard armoring options, which are things like sheet pile or tall concrete walls holding back earth, things that you might see on the sides of highways in urban areas. And we thought that perhaps a more natural approach might be more appropriate for this particular site, and so offered these suggestions in our response to the report review, things that might include regrading the slope and installing more natural support systems like living vegetation and logs or offshore barriers, but something that would definitely include living systems that can self-heal and adapt to this type of environment. And so the National Park Service agreed with our recommendations, and like Jeff was saying at the same time, Sam had been talking with Jeff about how EA could partner with ERDIC, our Engineering with Nature program, and try to find project sites where we could help incorporate nature-based solutions. And we told him about this site, and here we are. Yep, on a podcast.
When we did the show with Sam a couple of years back, it was like, well, we're looking for some really interesting sites where we could work together, and here we are. So I understand that those conversations led to actual work. It led to field research. Talk a little bit about that, Amy.
Yes, we have been collecting a lot of data over the past year. We're collecting water levels and wave information and weather data. And ERDIC and EA are currently using this information to create a hydrodynamic model near the bluff to evaluate our potential alternatives. So we can essentially create a simulation of storm events, taking sea level rise into consideration during now the existing time period as well as future time periods. And we can compare those conditions to some of the alternatives that we've been looking at. And some of those alternatives have come from project partners and coordination with Passamaquoddy Nation and other project partners at our recent workshop that we held just back in June.
So let's talk about that workshop. I know it was something that you were really looking forward to, Jeff, and it happened in June. Talk about the purpose of the workshop and what you were hoping to accomplish.
Exciting. It was absolutely wonderful to have that workshop take place and have it take place with all of these wonderful people that are contributing to this project. We had them all together in one room and had an opportunity to really talk more about all of the history and all of the information that we had collected. And we had a chance to go out to the island as well. And it was fantastic. And I just want to thank Donald and the Passamaquoddy Nation for helping with all aspects of that, to be able to be out there with us in person, sharing that rich history with us again. National Park Service, also wonderful host, helping us to better understand everything and getting us out to the island. And I should also mention that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was also there contributing as well with boats and vessels to be able to bring a large number of people to and from the island. So wonderful, wonderful day. And in fact, just for the audience, maybe, the days that we held that workshop back in June, I believe it was 3 days of sunshine. Beautiful,
Yep.
Beautiful weather. The rest of June was rainy and dreary. So we got the 3 perfect days in June to hold this workshop.
I understand, Amy, you really led the design of this workshop. We can't give you credit for the only 3 sunny days in June.
I
But
don't know. I mean,
I think she ordered it up, honestly.
talk a little bit about the workshop and what you were able to accomplish.
yes, it was a really big undertaking, but as Jeff said, just really excellent. And I think it's important to paint a picture of just how many people of different backgrounds we had there. We had biologists and geologists, engineers and planners and policymakers, tribal officers. It really was a diverse group. So keeping all that in mind, we hoped to work with the folks who were there to find out what was really important to them. I had a former boss who used to call these types of information gathering sessions the pain funnel. This was essentially meant to try and ask the right questions and cast a really wide net to gather as much information as you can, but then sort of whittle it down or funnel it down to a few specific priorities. And I think it worked out pretty well. There were about 25 people who attended the 2-day workshop in June of 2023. And we began the workshop by giving out information about the background of the project, where things stood now, the overarching goals. But then we asked something of our participants, and I think we ultimately asked for quite a lot. We had several breakout sessions where we broke the group up into smaller groups and then asked them to consider their priorities and what they would like to see improved. And then they came at this from many different angles. We asked them to think about aesthetics and cultural resources and level of effort that they were willing to put in for maintenance, things like that. And everybody definitely brought their A game. They came energized and focused and really committed. I don't think I could have asked for more in terms of attendees. There was definitely nobody snoozing in the corner. I can say that.
Well,
You had a good
Amy,
group.
Yes, we did. And a lot of credit does go to you too, Amy, because there was a lot of upfront work and planning that had to go into developing such a rich workshop like that. And you were there certainly leading many of those conversations and helping to compile data in real time so that we could react to it and then to be able to move in different directions as needed based on some of those findings. So thank you to you and the EA team for that hard work that went into it.
Yeah, there's always so much work up front to make a workshop design work. So good for you, Amy, and good for your team. I know that getting out on the site was absolutely critical to the success of the workshop. Becky, maybe you could talk about what was important and what you were able to show the participants?
Sure. I mean, I think part of it was just the challenges of how you actually get to the island. I mean, we had to really think about tides. You know, you can't get there at low tide unless you want to, walk through mud. And so just even the challenges of the access to the island as part of its history, I think was really important for people to appreciate. When you're out there on this really small island that has so much history going back thousands of years of Passamaquoddy history, and then the 1604 event, I think people get the sense of this as a kind of a current in time, a cultural landscape, as opposed to just an engineering problem to manage. And I was somewhat amused and always fascinated as we're bringing all of these people together. The first day we'd spent thinking about what could be done and a lot of the information, and then for people to be out there and see the island and say, I get it now. Yeah. This is not a big, So there was a lot of kind of reality checking and ground truthing that was fascinating to hear from. Again, to bring together the broad reach of the people who were participating. And so I think that was incredibly valuable to have them think, do some work, then see the island, and then we went back the next day, and it was like a lot of information that, was reality checked as a result of that.
That's right. And I already mentioned, we had Donald there as well as other members of the Passamaquoddy Tribe to be able to share with us their perspectives and insights and provide that personal, deeper understanding when it comes to the importance of the land. And that really resonated for me, and I know it resonated for all of our other guests as well. And Donald, I was hoping maybe you could share just a little bit more in terms of the history and make that alive for us again, what you shared with the attendees of the workshop.
Well, first I'd like to explain about the tribe. We have two communities. One, we call it the freshwater community, and that's at Indian Township. It's on the west branch of the St Croy. And then we have another community along the Passamaquoddy Bay, so we call that the saltwater community. Within both communities, we have environmental departments that specialize. The Indian Township specializes in the freshwater ecology, and the Pleasant Point saltwater community specializes in the saltwater information. And once we review some of the plans, it'll go through both these departments. So I'm sure that they're very interested in how this proceeds. Yeah, the history of the island, it's been, like Rebecca mentioned, it's been shrinking over time because of the rising ocean. It's an act of nature. But man has increased this amount of ocean rise. So for us, we actually see that. We hear the stories that have been passed down from generation to generation about the island and about the landing of the French. But actually, you can visualize it when they're telling stories, and then when you actually look at it, I look at the island and the size, it seems like it's shrinking, and we have one last chance to try to save that island and the history and the lives that were spent on that island. Mm-hmm. Another thing to consider is the French lost 30 people or so on the island. So it's actually a gravesite. It's a burial ground. It's not a tribal burial ground, but it's a Acadian burial ground. So we like to consider the impact on that too. Right. Whatever is being planned, we have to put special consideration on that information, because we treat all burials, our own burials and other burials. That's a spiritual part that has to be considered on any type of work.
Absolutely. And Amy, maybe you could talk about that in the workshop, people's reflections in the work of the workshop on protecting this, as Donald says, this very sacred site.
Yes. So after the first day of the breakout sessions, the workshop participants were able, like Becky said, to see the site up close and in person the following day. And they took this experience back to the breakout sessions later that second day, where they collaboratively shared information about the project site and its surrounding system. They contributed additional thoughts and ideas for the proposed nature-based design alternatives through another round of breakout group exercises and other activities. We did not let people take breaks. We really were, they were working hard the whole time. And from there, we essentially had our roadmap for the types of alternatives we knew the project partners were going to want to see in our final report.
Oh, excellent. A lot of work. I've designed and facilitated many of those workshops. I know it's a huge amount of work, and there's not a lot of downtime, but the results are always good.
Yeah.
Jeff, how would you summarize the workshop?
Well, again, exciting and truly memorable, and all of the information that we received and were able to obtain from the participants will certainly inform next steps for the project. And building on this theme of workshops, for our audience, the workshops are really wonderful when it comes to being able to gain insight and contributions from everybody. And these EWN type workshops, as Amy indicated, and Sarah, you too, we've held those workshops for years now, and they're exciting. And I think that people that attend those workshops really get a lot out of it, and we are really able to make some significant progress with the projects that they're focused around. So this one was top notch all the way.
It sounds like it. Before we sign off, I want to hear a little bit about the next steps, what you're all hoping to do, what you're hoping to achieve, building on the results of the workshops. And Donald, maybe we could start with you.
Well, this is an exciting year for the ecosystem of the St. Croix, not just of the island, but also just a little bit up the river. There's a lot of activity taking place. The removal of the first dam on the St. Croix, the Milltown Dam, that's going to allow a more of a returning to the past run of the river. And we've seen increases on numbers of fish from a few thousand alewives to 750,000 alewives just on opening up the fishways and helping them along. So the St. Croix also is going to play a major factor in the return of the ecosystem, because the St. Croix has a lot of animal history on it. It's a good place for the seals to sit on the rocks and wait for a fish to go by. It's a good place for birds. I see one was trying to build a nest on one of the towers out there. That's how rich the wildlife is coming back. So we're going to continue to work with the scientists. We're hoping that we can be a working part of this, and they understand our direction and we understand their direction. And our environmental teams are pretty excited about this.
It's wonderful. Wonderful. And Becky, how about you? What were the big takeaways and the big next steps for you coming out of the workshop?
Well, I can't thank everybody enough. To be able to have the support and the capacity to bring together. I mean, this is literally a dream team of expertise from from a broad range of knowledge, everything from scientists in the room who were speaking language that I didn't even know what they were talking about part of the time, to the all the way to the significance of the island as part of Passamaquoddy homeland and the cultural significance of it, to the responsibility that Park Service has for us to be able to assemble the best available information to make good management decisions. So this was truly unique. It is an example of leadership and capacity building and thinking that is really critical for land managers. And so it's just been a real privilege to be part of this.
Thanks, Becky. And it's such a model for everything that you're working on going forward. I think that's a really neat component of this project.
Most definitely. And
Amy, for you and your colleagues, workshops always devolve into work.
Yeah.
Yes. I think you've got some specific engineering work to do coming out of the workshop. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We do, yes. This was sort of one of those projects where we were collecting data for a very long time, and then it was sort of hurry up and wait, and now we can hit the ground running, and we have a lot of information from that workshop. So right now we're working with ERDIC, with the Coastal and Hydraulics Laboratory, and also the Cold Regions Research and Engineering Laboratory for modeling and the shoreline bluff change mapping. So we'll deliver a report to the project partners in October that will describe the work we've completed to date out at the island and a pretty broad description of our alternatives analysis, I should say broad and in detail. And from there, the project partners can select the option they would like to see carried forward into conceptual design. But during this whole process, there will be more virtual meetings and phone calls and lots of information still to be shared.
Again, the guests we've had on today have been just wonderful in terms of sharing insight, perspective, and what has been happening out there to date. And to Amy's point, we're really just getting started in some respects, and having this opportunity to assimilate everything. And we probably should also mention again that the University of Virginia and Brian Davis, he's also been on our podcast. He's also working collaboratively with the project partners to come up with the designs and renderings that we ultimately want to put forward and discuss, and certainly having an opportunity to talk with Donald and the Passamaquoddy Tribe and ensuring that we are integrating traditional ecological knowledge along the way and have those contributions and input inform ultimately where we go becomes absolutely critical. And so I'm just so excited about where we're headed and the opportunities that this project will offer.
Agreed, Jeff. And I guess from my perspective, it's just thrilling to hear how much you've all been able to accomplish bringing these multidisciplinary groups together, all this expertise and all this passion and commitment to bring to bear on this project. It's really exciting. Want to make sure that we keep track of how this project evolves and what you end up doing at the end to protect and preserve this island. As we wrap up, I want to ask Donald the last question. Donald, talk to us a little bit about your vision for St Croix Island.
I'd like to try to see it stabilized. I'd like to see it as a place where people can go to enjoy, maybe to go and for the tribe to practice some cultural activities, and for the Acadians, a place for them to go to reflect, on their ancestors that are buried there, and a place for the tribe to go to also reflect on our history. It's like where the world came together right on the St. Croix for Passamaquoddy, that's where everything for us changed. Our whole world changed from that little island. So it's a good reflection.
Absolutely. Thank you, Donald, for sharing your long history and the history of your people on the island. Becky and Amy, thank you for sharing your passion for the island, and also all of you for your very deep commitment to protecting the island, preserving it. I think that your collaboration to honor and preserve this really unique history of this beautiful island that's so pivotal to really all of our history in North America is so important, and it's so inspiring. So thank you all for sharing that story with us. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening. If you have any comments about this episode or anything that we're working on in the Engineering with Nature program, please give us a call or drop us a note. Details are on the Engineering with Nature website. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you'll join us again as we talk about engineering with nature.
You've been listening to the EWN podcast, developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, for more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN podcast is produced by Eye Contact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.